Hi, everybody. I'm Atit Shah. I'm the Chief Creative Officer of Digitas North America. And I have the honor of spending some time with this illustrious group here who've made a beautiful, harrowing, but ultimately, upward moving piece in A Fire Inside. And so I'd love for you to take a moment to introduce yourselves.
Zara, do you want to go first?
I'll go first. Thank you, Luke. I'm Zara Curtis, Chief Marketing Officer at NRMA Insurance, the brand.
Yeah, okay. I'm Nick Worthington from the Tuesday Club. I'm a copywriter, trained copywriter, and now working with the brand and extending my copywriting into feature length stuff with projects like this.
I'm Luke Mazzaferro, and I'm from an Australian production company called FINCH, and I was the co-director and co-writer on this film.
Wonderful. Well, I think before we begin, I just wanted to, with my compliments, talk to, how amazing this film was, chronicling the human resiliency, and this kind of selfless community in the face of this harrowing and nightmarish subject matter, the Black Summer bushfires, and so kudos on giving it a sense of hope, drawing audiences in with such a sense of palpable emotion, and doing it also beautifully. So first things first, I'd love to hear a little bit about the origin story from your perspective, from your, as clients, as creators, how did this come to be, this project?
Shall I jump in and then Luke,
Yeah,
you can help me come with Wertho. Look,
Ladies first,
like all good things, quite organically, but deliberately, if we can say that. I think, I'm from a TV production background, value long form storytelling, ended up working in an insurance company. And I think, insurance is visible and our job is quite important in the world of climate change and making sure communities are more resilient. So when you've got a brand that stands for help, I think you're in a really good place. And it is when you know the essence of your brand, you can really do something with that. And then it sort of happened very organically. We came across a guy who was a frontline firefighter who had some really good footage. And we're excited about that as a marketer. And he happened to take that footage to FINCH, to Luke, who's on the call. And I'll let Luke pick it up in a minute. But they felt, hey, this is a much bigger story. And you got something here. And then we reached out to Wertho, who does all our purpose work with us, and sort of went, hey, this could be bigger. And it just sort of evolved and became a film, became a big idea, all centered around help. And from a brand perspective, making sure we were really leading an impact and a change in Australian society. And that's really what the end of the film with the call to action's about. But Luke, you can probably, and Wertho, put more creative color to that. But it wasn't, let's go make a doco, which I think is sometimes the mistake marketers make. It beautifully came from a proper insight and knowing who your brand is and getting the right collaborators around it to help you tease that out.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think there was actually kind of a by chance moment, because that particular firefighter is a filmmaker as well, and we had seen his talk where he was talking about his experiences from the front line, and that it was just at the back end of the fires coming to an end, and it was the first time we had a real insight into the humanity behind the disaster, and so that was kind of the spark, I think, for all of us, that there was wanting to explore the psychology behind these volunteers who go out every day and do this, and then as we dug deeper into it, not just the frontline workers that are putting on a helmet and rushing towards the fires, but the community volunteers and just the average folks out there who are doing their bit, their individual actions. But for Justin Crook, who's actually an American who was director on the film with me, it blew his mind that 90% of Australia's firefighting force is volunteer-based. And that's 170,000 plus members. So that wanting to explore that was a really big thing for him. And it's, you know, it's a dramatic stat because these fires are unlike others we've had in recent memory where they just went for months. It wasn't just a weekend that they were giving up their family time or their day job. It was weeks and weeks and turned into months. And yeah, so that was a driving catalyst story-wise for us to begin the journey.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, from my perspective, as Zara was saying, the NRMA brand's just all about help, and then to have this horrific occurrence happening in Australia, impacting every one of their customers and all of the people in Australia and their community. And NRMA has kind of been there it's a 100-year-old company. So it's been trying to kind of keep Australians safe for a long time, but things are changing. And I think the means of brands to actually communicate and talk to people, and, you know, partially sort of, you know, education might sound the wrong kind of words, but the whole process was extremely educational for, I think, the whole team working on it, working out why these people do what they do, what it takes to create sort of resilience and to sustain it. And then to also, long after the fires, going into that whole, you know, what actually happens to the, you know, the post-traumatic stress disorder and all that.
Yeah.
Then, you know, just became a human story. And I think we started, like most documentaries, having an idea of where you thought it was going to go. And then once you start meeting the people and seeing the stories that are, you know, actually coming out, you know, it just gets a life of its own. And it ended up, it was quite interesting, I think, because we had a starting point that we all agreed on. We had no idea what was happening in the middle. And then at the end, the idea of, could we do something using this, you know, a feature documentary, could we do something that was going to be interesting enough to get a wide audience and actually change behavior? And the bit that I've been really fascinated with brands more recently, and I mean, film is just such an extraordinary medium, but for brands that actually want to change the world, do incredible long form where you can actually really tell a proper story that's a real story, and then go on track and create real effect afterwards was, I think that it took us by surprise, the power of the story, but also the people that came on board during the project who also wanted to create a safer Australia. So the community grew, and that community is alive now and active every day, building, working out, finding new ways to build a safer Australia. And I think, I don't know who said it first, but someone said, you know, the film was like a lightning strike for a lot of people. You know, the catalyst to form groups, to create organizations, to get together, to get this resilience. And I think the learnings out of the film created an ongoing narrative that's still being written about how you bring those communities together to create a stronger, you know, a stronger, not just respond to disaster, but just be, you know, more prepared for it and understand how to interact with other people. And also, I mean, gosh, the film, I mean, it's coming back to me. I haven't watched it for a while, but yeah, the emotional roller coaster of some of the people in the film was just like, you know, it was incredible.
Pretty incredible.
When the people, I mean, right at the end of the film, you know, that invitation at the end, you know, is real. And, you know, when we say the film, it's, you know, this isn't the end. That's absolutely, you know, what we meant and what we're actually trying to do.
Yeah.
Amazing. I think, I don't know if Nick froze. Oh, you're back.
Sorry.
No, that was a wonderful response. And I want to, if I can tap into, you talk about the emotional roller coaster, and we get to be co-pilots. And a couple of, there's a number of protagonists over the course of the film in their own way, contributing to this, the rebuilding of this community in so many ways. But two quite, two characters, love to underscore two real people, people on the volunteer front line, Nathan Barnden and Brendan O'Connor. I raise them because as storytellers and as aspirational makers of stuff like this, mining the sea of potential stories you could cover, in getting to this. Can you talk to the process of identifying these central characters? Like, did you know out of the gate that Nathan and Brendan might be vehicles for talking about the main arc, or did that just kind of happenstance emerge in some way? I'd be curious, because the story mining, it taps into the story mining piece. And how do you identify the stories that are, especially when you're telling, telling?
Yeah,
truth in
it was it was an involved process. We had two producers who went out to some of these communities and did a bunch of research and met people and built that trust. I think building trust was a major thing once we had identified certain characters, because a lot of these people, as Nick touched on, were dealing with PTSD and the real aftermath of what had happened. But yeah, someone like Nathan came to our attention quite quickly. He did have a bunch of media coverage at the time. But when we met him, it was 6 months after the fact, and he was in quite a different place, and his family was in a very different place. And it did take a while for us to build a relationship where they agreed to go on this journey again in telling their story. Someone like Brendan also had a little bit of media coverage, but there was some really wonderful happy accidents, like making any documentary, where we just met people in the field. So someone like Barbara Stewart, the woman who gives her accommodation pod away, that was just a by chance meeting where we were filming the arrival of her pod that day, and we had no idea who we were meeting. And that was just, striking gold with someone as wonderful and genuine as her. And even Paula Zara, who runs the Bargo Community Pantry, that was us just literally location scouting. We'd actually just been visiting Brendan, meeting him in person for the first time, and we're driving past and noticed the sign for her store where she makes all the meals. And we went in and we said, "Oh, what do you guys do here?" And she said, "Oh, we're a community pantry." And she asked us what we were doing, and we said, "We're making a documentary on the bushfires." And she said, "Well, sit down. I've got some lasagna coming out of the oven. Do you want to have lunch with me?" And that started the relationship with her, and just that raw sense of altruism that is just completely natural to her. And so identifying them, there were many. I think we spoke to over 100 people. But I think what ultimately, and I hope it comes through in the film, we found organically that there was sort of an intertwinedness that came with a bunch of these people, which we felt was emblematic of the small, like tight-knit communities that were affected by at large from this disaster. So we ended up leaning towards people that had some sort of connection. So it felt like, even though there's multiple stories, that there was kind of a through line that you were following by going one community where there was some connection.
Amazing. It was beautifully done. Yeah. I'm curious, Zara, you talked about help being at the core of NRMA and, as an insurer. I would love you to talk a bit more about the thematic connection between, this prescient narrative in Australia and the brand, and what made that bond so tight, between this particular story and the brand.
I think what I'm really proud of here with Justin and Nick and the whole team is that we stayed true to the essence of the brand. So most marketers think that brands need logos to be storytelling. But what you've really got to find is the essence of that brand, which we knew is help, and also be true to what you do in the community. So as an insurer, we are on ground, first in, last to leave. Most of these people knew us or were customers of ours, but that was not part of the storytelling. It was, can we ethically hold our head up high and be part of this story, and feel really good at telling this story? And then I guess as we went over time, it's like, well, what are we going to do? Like, this is so raw. So you've got to remember, Justin and Luke are out there shooting. These people have lost everything, as you see in the narrative, but then we're hit by COVID. So Australia had to move on and go through their own process. So I think we shot, Justin can tell you how many hours of footage and over a incredible period of time through the deepest, darkest emotions of humanity. And I think knowing as a brand that we can stand by that and that we can help people do that. And that's where the whole Join the Australian Resilience Corps really came from while we were shooting. The pod Luke talks about is actually part of their resilience scheme, and we started to join those dots more broadly. So the film really did become the lightning strike. It changed our business strategy and impacted our entire company of 10,000 people. So not only did we sign a 5-year deal with the Australian Resilience Corps, the film is used to onboard all of our staff to really drive a business plan around making Australia more resilient and doing something about it. So you're seeing the film for the first time. We're living with it for 2 years, and we keep using it, and we'll get distribution here and really seeing it. It's really, really powerful. So making sure it lived the brand promise, lived the company purpose, and then as long as it's about help, comes through really strongly, we're happy with that, getting out of the way. This story wasn't going to be told either unless the brand did it. So we felt really connected to that. And it was myself and an ex-TV producer that works with me that saw these footage of this farm, and we're like, someone's got to tell this story. Like, someone's got to tell this story. So it was driven through storytelling need, and as a brand, the power to do it. It's pretty special.
It's an amazing feat. I'm curious, a little digging in a little bit more, I think that we've all had varying levels at brands selling in even projects of this importance, because there's questions of all the questions you've probably dealt with and swam in, from the ROI on this to brand attribution to, prioritization of other business opportunities. A little bit, could you color in, like, what did it take to, and granted, you're in a position like as a CMO where you can make the call on things, but
I wasn't then.
It wasn't then. Well, congratulations, but getting
look, it was hard, right? And anyone that's done this will know it. So I think initially there's a lot of enthusiasm, and it wanes pretty quickly as pressure comes in all different kinds of areas. And then the more excited people get, the more the controls come down around messaging and branding, or how this impacts other corporate strategies. Does the government think that we should be doing this? The questions, as the enthusiasm snowballs, so do the concerns and the risks. And it's really hard. So it was constant. You can't take this stuff on if you're faint of heart, but I think you also have to be pretty commercially savvy and believe in what it's doing. So we set out to build brand awareness and associate with help, but you can't overcomplicate your metrics. The actual metric is creating a game-changing piece of content that lived our purpose and having an action off the back of it. You can't get tricky. You have to buckle in for this ride, and you have to be pretty tough and resilient. We had a boss that believed in this project at the time and got out of the way. And we also had pretty senior people believe in it and buckle in with us and try and stay out of the way as well. But it was hard. And it was, I don't know, we probably went through 2.5 budget cycles over 2.5 years to make sure the film got funded. And then, of course, the media and the connections plan and the process that sits around that as well. So it was costly, but it felt right. And it felt like the right thing to do. So we buckled in and hung on in there.
Super inspiring. I mean, I think that I read somewhere that the film, at some point, I talk about, internal and external success, became, taser me if I got this wrong, but became the most watched documentary in Australia. I'd live for a moment. And I'd be curious from all your perspective, first of all, what an amazing feat, but just your take on that, your reaction to that, and what in your own mind or heart might be contributing to that ultimate adoption by Australian audiences of a film like this.
Do you want to go first, Justin?
We were really lucky to, firstly, the courage Zara talks about is very real, and these guys were amazing partners because it took a lot of courage, and in the middle of the pandemic as well, because we were filming all throughout the pandemic, which affected sort of the scope of what we could film as well, but then also the rollout. So, our world premiere, which was at City Film Festival, had been delayed because of the pandemic. And then the national cinema release was touch and go, and like all these shifting sands, and everyone stuck together and stayed on mission to get this out to as many people as possible. But we were really fortunate that the film, soon after its cinema release and festival premiere, was on Channel 9, which is one of the 3 major free-to-air networks in Australia. And the support they gave it was incredible. So it had a huge rollout on free-to-air television. And it just, that as a conversation piece, was kind of amazing. And I think as far as an Australian documentary goes, is fairly unprecedented.
Yeah, and that was an easy distribution point. They were like, yes, because I think what we touched on with Nick and Luke is that really, if you've lived through something like a bushfire, it pretty much touched everybody in our country, no matter where you live. So the reality and the feeling of that and the emotion is already there, being able to show the positive side of that storytelling. And to know that we're going to come through it again, as Nick said, this is just the beginning. And I think the realization, you guys in America probably see that. You've been through your own natural disasters. People are aware this is going to keep happening. So we're going to have to work together. And the ultimate uplifting nature of the film probably does that. I think, Wertho, that's what you're really proud of too. And that's why we think it's resonating here.
Amazing.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing number of things. I think, Atit, all the people in marketing, watching now, who have been trying to do bigger things and better things for brands, and not just advertising and not just brand small moments of brand salience, but create enduring platforms. It's been a frustration for me most of my career that things don't last longer, and so much of it is ephemeral. But the way this project grew and the amount of people that we had to bring in through NRMA's partners, long-term partners, Zara's talking about, the parent company, their programs with government about creating proper, security in Australia. All of those things coming together it was very, very hard for a lot of people, but they all came on board. And I think because it was such an incredible human story that affected everyone and everyone's security, it was something that was very hard for people to say no to. And we just had met an extraordinary bunch of people along the journey that all helped move it on a bit further. So I think that's the thing that I'm most interested in, and the learnings that I've taken out from it is long-term. We were talking earlier about systemic change. How do you actually change things? And you can't just be on the surface. You actually have to be on the ground and part of the structure of things. And when brands are able to do that, some of them are, then that's kind of next level for me, for brands. And then every brand wants to become a part of culture, actually part of the fabric of communities, and people understand why you're there and they don't want you not to be there. They can't do without you. It's really hard to get there. But I've absolutely, I felt enormously privileged working with people who knew so much more about so much more stuff than me, helping to do something as, it seems as easy as a story, but to get a story out to the whole country, as you were saying, and have them watching it everywhere, and all having that moment. It's mind-boggling to me. When I stop to think about it, I can't believe we did it.
And I think that the magic of long form, right? We're at Sundance, what a privilege, but long form storytelling. People in advertising called 60-second ads films,
Right.
That's not right. This is where power can happen if you get the narrative and the story bang in the heart of, your culture and your people and your society.
Such a heroic feat, a Herculean feat to get a feature-length film of this nature made, and with such love, and and to take the 2 years it takes, to not get bored of something or have it tossed to the wayside and kept going. Any parting advice for all the aspiring some dancers with their own clients or on the client side about getting, you know, if we, as you aspire for a North Star, a feature-length film of such purpose, of even just shooting from the hip, you know, what's a piece of advice you'd give them, you know, for everyone who's kind of toiled at this or, you know, tried to inch towards something like this?
Bravery.
Yeah.
Have a vision, be brave from a marketing point of view, and then I'll let the filmmakers and Nick, you know, one of the best creative speakers as well, but you got to be brave, you got to be bold, and you got to have a plan. You got to know what your brand stands for and be quite purist about that and be confident in it, and then open it up to culture and to what's happening around you. It's not the brand story, it's the essence of the brand sharing a story. And I think that's very different. And you got to know that, be confident in that, and then buckle in.
Love it.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it just comes down to incredible clients that, as Zara was saying, they understand their brand. They're serious about a purpose, you know, a brand purpose. They do know what they're trying to do. And they've got the board engagement into that. So it's not just the CMO, it's the, you know, it's the chairwoman.
It's the business.
And everyone that's into that. And then when you get, well, it stops being like marketing to solve a real sort of moment in time. And it starts to be something that's actually, some, you know, it's who we are. And I think this was that opportunity. And there's, in my experience, there's very, very few companies with leadership that are actually prepared to do those long-term things and actually really want to make the world a better place, not just for themselves, you know, financially, you know, however, then their shareholders, but actually want to make the world a better place. And saying it is one thing, and then next level is actually getting around to actually doing it. And there's a few brands in the world that are doing it, and they always blow my mind, and they always, I find them incredibly inspiring. And to be, you know, maybe getting part of that is has been great.
Great.
Yeah, I'd say two things, like finding the right partners, like making any film or show is a real marathon with bumps in the roads for whatever reason. So finding the right partners and the trust, you know, everyone having the same level of bravery and trust and having each other's back, because, you know, we've made this and lived this through the pandemic. And so just even getting it over the line and everyone still being locked armed is an amazing thing. So finding whether it's the right filmmakers and just, you know, that everyone is just on the same page, but then also just even from a filmmaking perspective, that it's, you know, that there's a real genuine story there as well. And you're not trying to like back too much into something that may not be quite right. And with this, it was a complete no-brainer. Of course, there was such an urgency to tell this story, and there's such a rich tapestry of humanity and drama that was just needing to be told. So it was an easy one in this respect. But yeah, if any other project going forward, just when it comes to long form, because there's a lot of choice out there. Everyone has a lot of choice of what documentary or film they want to watch. So you're competing with that. So it's yeah, really just making sure, looking yourself in the mirror and asking what is the best possible story for this. And then maybe it's not right. It may not be right all the time, but yeah, when it is, it's amazing because it is hard to do.
Incredible advice, incredible crew here. And, you know, thank you so much. Great to talk about such an inspiring piece in A Fire Inside, and wishing the film and all of you continued success. Thanks for sharing your story.
Our pleasure.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.